spot on. Are you recording? Are you?
I'm recording.
Starting, baby.
We're into it.
I'm ready.
Daniel Dobrenov. How are you?
Dobbs,
Dobbs.
please keep it simple
Better
for
known
everyone.
better known as Dobbs.
Only known as
I know
Dobbs
you.
recently.
Thanks for joining me, man.
Appreciate it, man.
Thanks for
Thank
joining
you
me.
very much.
You are, for me, you're one of the people I can really gain some inspiration from, just from your day-to-day enthusiasm, your day-to-day passion. I love meeting people that are just that get up stoked with what they're doing, and you know, and your energy and your frequency. One of the questions I was going to ask you later, I reckon that some people that meet you briefly might think you're fake because you're so up and about, you know. But I've known you for a fair few years now, and there's no. I'm just wondering how your wife manages you, because there's not much of a off switch. But
that is a psychiatric interview you're going to have to do with her, I think. But she deserves a Nobel Prize, if you ask me. The Peace Prize, I think.
Yeah. No. So I'm as I say, I'm really inspired by your passion and enthusiasm, and it's awesome to have somebody like you in in Queensland and in tennis and in Australian tennis. And you've obviously got, you know, a rich background of tennis, a lot of seeing tennis in a lot of different cultures, a lot of different countries, you know, also working in tennis at different levels. So I'm keen to hear about some of the parts of your journey. I'll ask you how long have you been in tennis? And what is it about this sport that you love so much?
After that introduction, you can't ask me a direct question without getting a little bit of a chance for me to say something as well. And the only reason that I am very interested to do this is because I've seen this podcast. I haven't seen many, but I've seen a lot of the guys here, and it's exactly the same opinion that I have of you. You're very passionate about tennis, and you're doing this for very authentic reasons. I think you're doing this to explore tennis and to find out more about people and find out more about how to develop tennis, how it all kind of comes together from different points of view. And I really want to congratulate you on that. And I keep saying to everyone that I honestly think in 10 years' time, you'll be the big fish coach in Tennis Australia or by yourself or something along those lines, because you're exploring avenues that you're bound to learn from. And that's why I think it's an honor to be with you here, man, because in 10, 15 years, you're going to be a big fish. I'm sure of this. And I'm happy to contribute to that if I can in any way.
Thank you, man.
I appreciate it, man. Let's not cry. It's not romantic. Next time, a candle in the middle of the
Sounds
table,
good.
okay?
Yeah. Take it off camera.
To get back to the nitty-gritty of the interview, I've been in tennis literally all my life. I started as a kid in Europe, in Eastern Europe. I'm Serbian, and I started in Serbia, and I played as a good junior in Serbia until '93, when we actually left because of the war in Yugoslavia. So I'm a refugee to Australia to some extent. I was a good junior when I arrived. I was 12 years old, not a word of English, but I was a reasonably good junior, so I ended up making those school teams, Met West, state teams and things like this. Met a couple of really cool guys who are still around tennis now. 1981 is my birth year, so there's a couple of guys running around still working in the sport. I just looked at my phone in Sydney. David Moore is working for Tennis Australia. Matt Turner, David Laverty are in Sydney, or Matt's in Brisbane actually, but I looked through my phone and I remembered some of these names, and I remembered on Facebook to see who's around. So it's nice to see that these guys are still enthusiastic and into tennis. So it's part of my big journey. To continue the story, I was a decent player until the end of high school, and because of the fact that we come from from a family that did not have the resources for me to continue tennis in a full-time touring basis, I ended up going to university and getting myself an IT and engineering degree. Proud of myself for doing that, but possibly the biggest waste of 4 years of my life, because as soon as I got a job, and I got a good job, I realized I never want to do this.
Really?
Sit in an office.
Yeah.
It's a long story. I wanted to do physio, but I didn't have a good enough OP in Queensland, 8 hour today, to get in. So and nobody taught the little crazy ethnic guy that you can study for 1 year and change. So I got into engineering and I did that.
And that was that. Yeah.
It was a tough degree and I got through it, so that was good. But at the same time, I was never really interested in it or passionate about it. It was more of a prestige thing for my family to have a son who's graduated from university. And throughout university, I continued to train and hit a lot, but I didn't compete. And when I realized that I don't want to be an engineer after 6-7 months of work, I moved to Italy. And I started to play Serie A, the league tennis over there.
You moved there with the plan to play tennis?
I moved there following my girlfriend, who's now my wife.
Yeah.
So a romantic story. I didn't want to lose her. So the only thing I could do there without being proficient at the language and whatnot was play. Had unbelievable luck to run into Alberto Castellani, the art of tennis. They had a lot of players there, very high-end players. Tipsarevic, Marak, everybody was there. Everybody kind of got on with me because I'm a little bit alternative and I spoke their language and whatnot, and I was hitting a reasonably good ball. Ended up running into a lot of good players who I ended up being sparring for, who I ended up being traveling coach for, where I ended up learning a lot from Alberto Castellani himself, especially the mental part of tennis. And this led to me becoming a coach. And the story goes on further where from there I got an offer from Karim Alami to move to Doha. And we ran the Davis Cup team there. We made good money. It was an easy job. And after 2 years there, I decided to go back into professional tennis because as hard as they tried in Doha, it wasn't the most professional atmosphere. Yeah. We got young kids instead of getting the established players, and we worked with 4 or 5 young kids, and we got what we got out of them. In 2 years, it was pretty good, but it's a culture. Tennis is a culture you have to build. You can't just pay. I had amazing colleagues. Pierre Gauthier was the head coach. He left Monfils, Grosjean, Clermont, all to come to that job. And as good as the coaching staff might have been, Gerald Cordemi was doing the fitness. He was a long time with Serena and Muratoglu recently. So as good as the team is, it takes a culture to build a culture. And we did our best, and I think we did a good job. The kids all turned out very normal, very good. Some of them still play tennis. Some of them switched to padel. But they ended up being universal kids who used the opportunity of travel and international coaches to benefit from that. So I think that was great. And I think that's very, very rewarding as a coach because you see them advanced as humans, not just as tennis players. And I think they play hand in hand, you know. And from there, I was asked by Zoltan Kuharski, who is a Swiss-Hungarian coach. He had 2 girls, 2 very good players, Polona Herzog and Petra Martic, 91 born girls. They were young. This was in 2009, I think. And they were both breaking in the top 200. And we ended up working together for 6-7 years. Both of the girls went top 50. Petra is still running around somewhere around 30.
Yeah.
So that was 6-7 years on the women's tour. Afterwards and in between, a lot of other players, some really good ones. So I decided that this is my career before I took that. And once I took that, that was the decision that this is what I want to do. And you talk about my enthusiasm and my craziness or my energy. I think once you discover what you want to do, and sometimes you have to try different things, such as I did. I went the academic path. I think you start to realize that you have to do it with your heart, with your brain, with your body. And the process of doing that kind of molds into you. So being around tennis makes me happy.
Yeah.
Being around a tournament, competing or watching the girls compete, hitting balls, keeping fit is overall something that I think makes me happy.
Yeah.
And I have 2 kids, and I want to be a happy, fit father for my kids. So that's a whole new motivation which opens up. Once you have kids, you're still too young for that. But that's probably the strongest motivation.
Yeah.
To be happy and to be successful and to be good at what you do.
Yeah.
So I think tennis was my way of trying to calibrate all this. And moving back to Australia before COVID, I stepped back from the tour. I run a little business in Brisbane. We're very conservative. We're not an academy. We're a team.
Yeah.
I think an academy provides education, provides fitness, provides all sorts of things. A team provides tennis and gives links and connections to people to provide the rest. So I work with good players, young ones. A lot of them go to NDS or NTA. So I enjoy this. And here I'm with two interesting girls, Božović and Bolton.
Yeah.
So I decided sometimes to keep myself sane, I have to go out to travel.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, you have to. Well, firstly, as you say, tennis is of being in tennis, and especially on the coaching side, you have to communicate a lot, and you have to be from what I've found, it's. I'm somebody similar to you in the way that I receive energy from being around people as well, and it doesn't drain me as much, which is probably a good asset for the industry we're in, you know, because you have to communicate a lot. And so for you, so now being at the stage where you're, you know, got multiple avenues of like you're coaching from social players to young kids at your place. I don't know how many hours you're doing on court with them, but you know the whole array of tennis lessons that you have got going on. You feel like you have to be doing a little bit on the performance side to keep yourself sane, to kind of for it to be rewarding enough, or do you see yourself potentially moving away from that performance side because it's somewhere where you've had a foot in the door for a long time?
I don't think that I'm a good coach for all different levels.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody is.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't work with social players. I don't work with little kids. My youngest are 13, 12, but really good ones.
Yeah.
And I play with them and I talk to them and I try to approach tennis with them in a way that I know performance works. This would be probably they would call a current affair if I did the same approach with 10-year-old kids with those modified balls or some adults who just want to play tennis to lose weight or to be fit. So I try to choose the niche which I'm good at. When I started, I had Isabella working with me. She's a TA, the Italian girl. She was working with the young kids and she was so phenomenal and so good that I would never try to match her.
Yeah.
Nor was I able to replace her with another coach. So I thought it would be correct and ethical to send those kids to other good coaches for that age group. And I kept doing what I do. I only do 2-3 hours a day. I'm a little bit spoiled. I'm not working too much, but I definitely do miss the high performance because the high performance gives you perspective of what you're trying to work towards.
Yeah.
So I do Australian Open in January with some Hungarians, which was my previous job. I have a lot of friends on the tour. I know a lot of the players, and I go there to kind of recharge my batteries a little bit and to give myself good perspective. And I think that this is important because when you do something, you've got to be in touch with what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And the only way you'll be in touch with it is actually you go there and you experience it and you live it and you do it.
Yeah.
I think a good coach is one which does what they are ready to do good, not who does what is profitable necessarily, but what he's able to commit to and do a good job with.
Yeah.
So my highest respect always went to the coach who got a player in the 300 and put them in the top 100, rather than the guys who almost prostitute themselves around in the top 50 because they've got names and they've got players, and there's a lot of bouncers like that.
Yeah.
So for me, a project now would be to take Boz and Bolton and some girls and really try to push away and find a system where I have to commit more as well to do the job. And if I can't, or if they can't, then I don't think we got to do it together. So we have to always balance and find what we think works, and we have to stick to what we do well. And then I think people respect that in the long run.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what my future plans are, but I'm definitely motivated to find out. And the way I'm going to find out is by giving things a really big push.
Yeah.
So that's why you see me now out here on the tour again, Canberra and here, and I'll be doing Gold Coast and Brisbane. So
yeah. No, it's awesome seeing you out of these tournaments, and I reckon it's you set a good example for a lot of other coaches out there. Just chatting with everybody, and the passion, as I was touched on at the start, and as you mentioned, I also think a good coach, from what I've seen, is also somebody that is able to recognise the areas that they aren't a good coach in. And for even the best coaches I know, they are they're able to not be dominated by their ego whatsoever. And the small amount of coaching I've done, it's been super beneficial for my tennis career as a player. And as a person, to when I've gone back in and in order to keep funding myself this whole time, I have done the social plays, I have done hot shots, and even me stepping into like a little town of Noosa, and I can see my ego potentially there going, oh well, I've been on the tour playing all these tournaments, this and that, and I come there and I'm looking and I'm running the worst hot shot session out of the 4 courts because I'm a rookie.
All the rich mums are looking at you. I think that's the strategy there, no?
Yeah.
The yummy mummies, huh?
Definitely a potential profitable avenue for the future.
Absolutely.
There's so many aspects to it, and I think it's good to try out to put your toe in the water in a lot of different areas to see where you're good at and what you like, and I'm going to direct you with one question that I had written here in the early days. So you mentioned you grew up in Serbia, and you experienced when you went back and you coached even after you went back to Italy and you coached Martic, and you tend to work and you know a lot of Eastern European and European coaches and players. Just following, I'm kind of deviating the trajectory here, but following on from I'm always trying to gain a further awareness of where Australian tennis is at, and this is my whole a lot of my incentive for doing this kind of stuff as well. And I'm trying to create just acquire more knowledge and have more awareness myself, so I can have a better input. Like in that conversation we had the other night with Lawrence Robertson and a lot of those guys.
He's a really good guy.
That was really cool to have something like that. But what are some things that you noticed differ between, obviously people always talk about Europeans producing a lot of players, Australia not. Obviously there's the blaringly obvious reasons about population, and that is...
It's the systems which produce players. And you're going to make me incriminate myself possibly by the time I answer all of this, but there is a big difference.
Yeah.
And the difference is not particularly in the kids or in the humans, in the people who are playing the tennis, but in the way that the system is demanding. The minimum requirements and the way that the values are set are quite different. I can talk a lot about this, but I think, so to backtrack, a good coach, you were talking about coaches and egos. I think you become a good coach when you can actually work beyond your ego.
Yeah.
Because if you're a good coach, you'll somehow manage to fade into the background so that the player becomes the light. This is very important, because if it's about you, the coach, then it's not about the player, and tennis is about the player. So coaches, especially young ones, have to be very careful with constantly trying to show their knowledge or trying to show how good they are, except if they're built like you and you take your shirt off every time. But I think the ego is a big enemy.
Yes.
The work needs to be done, and the player needs to play better. And the coach doesn't have to be great. The coach has to find a way to make that done. I was very lucky to be surrounded with very good coaches, and very often I would ask coaches who are better than me to help me with my player, and let them be the hero. Let them, if I've got a Spanish guy playing inside-out forehands, then I would probably ask him to teach my player to hit some off forehands.
Yeah.
Because I think she needs to do that better, or he. Or if I've got, I don't know, Paul Hanley, playing doubles, then I'll probably ask Paul, please, can you do this and do this? I might know how to do it, but him doing it, or somebody who is experienced and better doing it, has more impact on the player. And that's what matters, the impact on the player.
Yeah.
And the reason that I'm talking about this is because this leads to your question about Australian tennis, is how much impact do we have on the kids here compared to in Europe? How much impact does a federation have? How much impact does a coach have? How much impact does a parent have? And in Australia, this is from a completely different approach and a point of view than it is in Eastern Europe especially. And this has to do with culture, this has to do with history, with past, with upbringing. Don't forget, Eastern Europe was communist for a long, long time. So individualism wasn't as strong. Individual rights were not as big. So these kids, they grew up doing good things for their society, for their school, not for themselves necessarily. These kids were very much dictated by teachers, by coaches. And coaches have a lot firmer hands, a lot stronger iron hands. That's the expression, I think. They have a lot firmer authority over the kids.
Do you think that because of that culture influence, the kids have more faith in their coaches?
Well, when I was 12 years old, we couldn't go onto the court until we did 100 double jumps.
Yeah.
And whether you're doing 10 times 10, or you can do 100, or you're doing 20 times 5, you're not coming onto the court until you can do the 20 double jump, with the 100 double jumps. So a lot of kids struggled with this, especially little skinny kids. Some of them were like this, some of them matured quicker. But they all had to do this to get on the court. So after 2-3 months of this rule coming in, pretty much every kid was able to do it reasonably efficiently and quickly. And there was no question. And because they were able to do that, they were able to work in a certain intensity. They learned to move in certain frequencies, in certain physicality on the court, in a certain mentality. Not to mention 2-3 years later, you got to run 400 meters 8 times in under 1 minute 10, and if you don't do it, you can't go on the court, and the parent has no say, and the coach either did this with you, or the fitness coach, who the coach chose, some crazy Russian guy or some crazy Serbian guy. If you don't do it, you can't go on the court.
Yeah.
And this was the discipline, and this was the method of motivating these kids, not motivating, of developing these kids.
Yeah.
And if the kid chooses to succumb to the pain and suffering, well, then that kid had no character to play.
Yeah.
And if the kid can somehow push through this, then that kid built character.
Yeah. Okay, so what if you get... Like, I laugh at myself as an example. We talk about you coaching Petra Martic, right? And the first time we met, like, I look back objectively at myself, and I think about if Tennis Australia said, here, Callum, here's 15-year-old Callum, what are you going to do? And I think about my mentality. Clint Fife used to always say to me, life on the Sunshine Coast is too good, that's why no one will make it. And this is ringing in my head ever since then, and it still rings in my head. I could be a rubbish man and we can have a good life, Yeah. And
that's the beauty of this country.
It's the beauty of this country,
that's why we're all here, best country in the world.
It's the detriment of resilience of development of an athlete, right?
But how do you develop resilience?
So I'm saying if you get, so I agree with everything you're saying, but if you get a 15-year-old Callum that's pretty talented, kind of, he's got a decent understanding, decent of tennis, got decent hand skills, and but just lazy as fuck.
Yeah.
Like, and if you go too hard, like, how do you deal with a kid like that? Whereas if you go too hard, maybe you get him just quitting tennis.
You have to. This is psychology. I did a master of sports psych, and I learned a lot about the theory of psychology. But I realized that psychology doesn't work the same for you, for me, or some guy from Africa, or someone from a different culture, because psychology is based on the belief system and the environment you grew up in. So what's okay for you might not be okay for me. A Muslim guy will not eat bacon and drink beer. For you, it's normal to drink beer. he's not bad, you're not good, or the other way around. It's simply different cultures. So a coach needs to understand the system of the person he's working with and needs to explain to that person that they are experts in teaching how to become a tennis player, and these are the steps that he sees, and these are the steps that the kid needs to take to get to where he gets to. In Australia, in general, and I hope I'm right, because I base a lot of my, or I will base a lot of my, now that I'm back in performance, work on the following. Australians, English, Anglo-Saxons, are very binary in the way that they evaluate things. Binary means 0 or 1, failed or succeeded.
Yeah.
I think this causes a lot of them to be afraid of setting big goals, just in case they don't achieve them.
Yeah.
So a lot of guys, we just talked about one before, they want to get through futures, qualies, get a point. That's the first goal. And then the second goal is to get more points, and then maybe qualify for challenges, and then you know, they have a system of where they're trying, but always the goals are set to something that they believe is achievable, because their confidence has to be based on their ability to succeed at what they're planning to succeed. And if they don't succeed 100%, well then they failed, and then the confidence suffers. And I find that the Western world in general, very much, but especially the Americans, Australians, Anglo mentality is somewhere along these lines. Whereas when you look at the others, they have a different way of looking at things. They're dreamers.
Yeah.
And what if I asked you the question, if you imagine that you want to be number 1 in the world, and you use this, and you really start to imagine it to the point where it's coming from your heart, that you actually believe it, and if a coach or a friend or a psychiatrist, psychologist, whoever helps you really get that picture, and you really are able to use this to commit and to motivate yourself to do everything that it takes to be like Djokovic or to be like Federer, Nadal, whoever you want, what happens if you achieve 70% of that? You're 30 in the world, 40 in the world, you're making millions of dollars, you have women and cars, whatever it is you're into, and yet you only achieved 70% of your objective. You understand? So this is something that is completely out of the scope for a lot of people. But if you can really make yourself think in a different way, if you can really make yourself and convince yourself that, look, I'm just going to do this and this, because a lot of people, they calculate, once I get my point, then I'll do more fitness. Once I get my challenges, then I'll learn, I'll practice longer, more, whatever, you know. They try to somehow justify everything by this.
They think that naturally their day-to-day schedule will evolve.
They expect evolution without actually understanding what they want to evolve to. You know, a monkey didn't expect to be playing video games on a phone one day, and that's not why evolution happened. It's evolution will take its own way, but what are you trying to get to? What are you trying to achieve? That's what counts. Yeah. And being very aware of that, actually, and the problem is people are afraid, like I said, to be aware of this because it affects their confidence. So they're basing confidence on the wrong thing. Yeah. Have your dream, have your motivation, and then confidence should be derived from 3 points. Number 1, you can be confident if you dare to do something. Yeah. So dare to hit your forehand bigger. Yeah. You know, you have a good backhand, your forehand's your weakness. So dare to do more, play heavier, hit bigger, whatever. You have to dare. The second thing you have to do is you have to accept the consequences of daring. So you might benefit and profit from what you're doing. You're going to have a success. Or there's a good chance, usually more than the first one, you'll have failures. You'll not have success because you're hitting your forehand bigger. So you have to accept the fact that you'll make more mistakes. You'll hit more winners, but you'll make more mistakes. You will lose matches. You will do this. You will do that.
That's a case of accepting that there may not be quick growth. So accepting that if I'm going to try and evolve my game, I may have a couple of bad losses.
There may be. I dare you to walk up to a chick in a bar. Maybe you get her straight away, maybe you don't. So I don't want to limit it to say that there won't be quick growth. There might be. It just might be a click. Yeah. It just might be a decision which actually means a lot to you, and it makes things happen. There might be quick growth. So these are the first 2 points.
Yeah.
And they're the responsibility of the player. You're the one who has to dare. You're the one who has to be brave. You're the one who has to accept all the shit and the good that comes with that. And the third one, which is I think the most important one, is be resourceful. What does that mean? To be resourceful means that if you dare to hit your forehand bigger, if you accept that this means you're going to miss or you're going to get good shots, to be resourceful means to have someone, something, or some method, usually a coach, and this is why a good coach is important. Your coach is your resource to help you analyze why you're successful or why you're not successful with what you're doing. And if you have a good coach and if you have a good resource or a good source of information to work on this part, there has to stay, the acceptance has to stay, the analysis is what helps. So if you have a good resource, then it's just a question of time. As long as you keep daring and hitting, I could change your bloody grip on the forehand. And if you spend enough time doing it, eventually it'll come to something. As long as you believe in the resource. You know, it would be actually stupid to do that, but you know what I mean. So, and if you have these 3 things active in every practice session, then it's a question of time whether you will succeed or not.
Yeah.
And that's why you should be confident. You should be confident not because your forehand's going in, or not because you're winning matches because of that forehand. You should be confident because you have the balls to dare, because you accept the good and bad that comes with that, and you have a good resource which will eventually get you to where you want. And because of this, you should be confident. And if you base your confidence on these 3 things, and if you take responsibility for them, then it's a question of time before you actually get the result that you want.
Yeah.
And for this, it's necessary to have the big dream, which almost is, you know, unrealistic in this world. Have the big dream. Imagine you're going to be a millionaire. But then what are you going to do? What do you have to do? You have to maximize your chances. And then you have to be brave to do them, accept, and have a resource that will help you do this.
See, yeah, I love that, and it's absolutely a great message, and it's idealistic. But I'm trying to rebut you here. But when I think when I'm trying to get in the head with getting my coaching head and trying to help younger players, or as I said at the start, I'm trying to think about the way my thought process was and what held me back from developing more. And I just struggled I'm talking like a 16-year-old brain here in a way. I struggled to have an actual process mentality. I struggled to dare because I was too scared about maintaining my sort of place in whatever hierarchy I valued in the tennis Queensland or wherever I saw myself at. I struggled to, I didn't want to change the grip on the forehand. I didn't want to rebuild the serve, you know. I didn't want to do things that made me feel like a worse tennis player initially. So now I try and think about when I get these projects, when I'm finished playing and start to be a coach, how can I get them to understand a more process-based mentality? I look at Dane Sweeney compared to me. Him at the same age, he has a wider awareness of understanding that if he's really going to be a player, he has to, at his size especially, he has to develop like firepower out of his forehand.
He's doing a lot of good things.
Yeah. He just seems to see the process.
I quite like this guy.
At a longer, he seems to understand. Even if I won the clock back at 16 or 17, he seems to understand that it is a marathon more so. So because he's daring to be higher, whereas I was almost too scared. I didn't want to forego like initial short-term success.
But we just talked about this because you had short-term goals,
Yeah.
short-term objectives, and see how it's built into you.
Yeah.
It's actually built into you because subconsciously your system does not allow you to think long-term.
Yeah.
If you want to be number one in the world, can you make it with that forehand? Can you make it with that laziness? Can you make it with that behavior? Can you make it with that way of thinking? You know, if you imagine that guy who's number one, how's he hitting his forehand? How's he thinking? How's he acting? How's he sleeping? How's he eating?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. People are afraid to look into the big picture. Once you see the big picture, then you can zoom in on some of the details and you can actually remember that you're working towards that big picture. You know, you're afraid of losing your ranking in Tennis Queensland because you're a good player in Tennis Queensland and you know you will change If you change your forehand, you will go from 1 to 10, and that's going to debilitate your confidence. That's exactly what we were talking about.
Yeah.
You have to dare to accept the fact that you might go from 1 to 10. But if you're going to be the Callum who's playing like Djokovic, then that's a necessary step.
Yeah.
And if you have a coach, or if you have a person, or if you have a system that's going to help you achieve that, well, then the problem is solved. So the trick is not to look at the little details. The trick is to actually look at the big picture and then zoom in on the details. And this is where a person has to be very realistic. This is another thing about the Eastern Europeans, you want to call them. These are the most transparent, direct people in the world. So when you look at some things, you don't try to coat it for your ego. You look at yourself and I look ugly here, I look good here. It is what it is.
Yeah.
A lot of people can't look themselves in the eye, in the mirror.
Yeah.
Because they don't like what they see. So they will look somewhere where they think they look good.
Yeah.
But you've got to have the big picture, and you've got to be honest with yourself, and you've got to look where you need to do the changes.
Yeah.
And it's funny I'm saying this. I've just listened to Schwarzenegger's audio book.
Yeah.
And he talked about how he won Mr. Universe. His calves were shit, and that's why he lost 1 year. So the guy cut off all the pants at the knees so that his calves were everywhere, and he had to look at them all the time. So he felt exposed. So the guy did more calves than anyone else, and then he became what he became.
That's right.
So he was beyond his ego.
Yeah.
And the thing is really to you're asking me how I would fix whatever.
I know it's not a simple question.
No, but it would be to spend time with you to really make you see a picture.
Yeah.
And to really have you create the image, and you create the person and the persona. But a persona doesn't mean forehand and backhand. It's a part of it. It's the human. How does he live? How does he think?
Yeah.
It's quite a big commitment. Look at Djokovic. The guy's crazy, huh? The guy.
So I did a session. So I hit with Thomas Gadecki today. Right.
Yeah.
And I got serious time. I'm really good friends with the Gadeckis all around. Good friends with his older brother, Olivia.
Good people. Yeah.
His mum, their mum's been unbelievable to that whole family.
Strong, good
and
woman,
I was impressed today. I haven't hit with Tommy in a while, and he's always had potential, and we always knew he was going to grow to be tall.
Yeah, he looks good. Yeah.
But so he's just behind Charlie, Camus, Pavle, and Hayden.
Yeah,
it's just. But his upside is as good as any of them, right? We
material.
Know that.
He's good material.
Yeah, he's good material.
Very good material.
So Colin Ebblesyte is his coach, and from I was on court with him today, and I was so pleased to see. It seemed like Tommy had faith in Colin and had bought into his long-term theory of he was serve volleying on me today. He was rushing the net, and previously when I played him, it was easy. He'd sit at the back and you just make him run. He's not comfortable with his body yet, and so I'm like, okay, well that's really cool. If Tommy can see long-term enough, have enough faith in his coach's process.
But that's good coaching.
It's good coaching.
Hats off to Colin.
Exactly.
Hats off because they have a project that they're working on together.
Yeah.
And it's not like Colin is working on Tommy. It's Colin and Tommy are working together to create this guy who doesn't exist yet. How is he going to play? Is he going to serve and volley? So if he's serving volleys, he probably needs to do more legs. So he needs to get stronger, and he needs to be, brave to do that on the tough points, even though he's won most of his matches probably grinding from the back or whatnot. So as long as the guy sees the big picture and believes in his resource, which is hats off to Colin, there's a good chance that this will actually come true.
Yeah.
It's a question of committing to it and then staying committed to it and working through it.
Yeah.
So
and
good.
You also mentioned, like a really gauge on a good coach is if they can actually have a player for a long enough time to have an influence.
Absolutely.
So if Colin had Tommy for 1 year and he committed to this is just an example, but if he committed to this game plan, maybe he actually sees no success on Tommy in a year. Maybe Brent Larkham then goes, well, let's look at what your ranking trajectory is. Oh, you haven't really done that well. And if Colin doesn't have a process mentality and the whole team can't see that, they could think that he's actually done an average job in the 12-month period he's had him. This is why when I look at, now I'm not here to have a Tennis Australia bagging session by any stretch of the imagination, but when I look at, it's just I feel like it's so good to have players stay with a coach for a longer period. Then you can't be chopping and changing too much, because then there can be no long-term plan implemented. Not to say that if things aren't working, yes, change. But from precedents, I feel like I've seen too many things like change too quickly.
Performance indicators.
Yeah.
You're talking about.
Yes.
Complex, but at the
Super
same time,
complex.
but at the same time, it's the player
Yeah.
that should be the one that you look at. So if the player is making results, then don't say that the coach is great.
Yeah.
And if the player is not making results, don't say that the coach is shit. It's the player. And remember what we said, a good coach will fade into the background.
Yeah.
So your analysis needs to be upon the player. And if the player is doing well, and if the player is actually making results, then it's because the player is making results. If the player is satisfied, then the player is satisfied. How much of the player, how much of the conception the player understands with the coach if there is no results? So after a year, like you said, after a year or two, the player is still stagnating at a certain point, but you can see that the player is happy and the player is physically getting stronger and the player is mentally getting better and the player is technically or strategically doing more and more of what he needs to do. That's where the expertise of people like Brent, who I think is quite switched on about tennis, or the sergeant or someone like this who is looking from the top, needs to make these judgments.
Yeah.
And that's why it's good to see that these guys are not 20-year-old smartasses. These are guys with experience, and these are guys who understand life a little bit better, and they can actually make these judgments. And because they have their positions, I think that they need to be left to make these judgments.
Yeah.
But it's the communication with the player that needs to be the main deciding factor in these things.
Yeah.
Rather than always saying, the Broncos won because this guy was coaching. It's how the people who don't understand think.
Yeah.
And it's the coaches who want the recognition, who want the ego.
Yeah, right.
One of the biggest, but psychologically, the worst thing you can tell a player is, hey, you're good because I'm your coach.
Yeah.
You're making them dependent on you.
Yeah.
So you're destroying the autonomy of the player. You're destroying the individuality of the player.
Yeah.
So if somebody says this to you, if you have a daughter and her boyfriend tells her this, you shoot the guy. He's making her dependent.
Yeah. Speaking of Paul Hanley, when Paul was helping out Dane and I valued the way that he was trying to help me with my serve at the time, and I never met Mr. Ken Ulrich before. But he said, I'm going to call my old coach. I don't know what to do here. I'm not sure which way we should go about this. Let's get Ken in. And I really valued that about Paul. There was no I got everything under control. He was calling on resources.
I think Ken Ulrich has an IQ of about 300.
See, Ken's issue sometimes is, so it comes back to the communicator thing. That's a massive part of being a tennis coach, is understanding and interpreting a personality and thinking, how am I going to best communicate this message? So Ken sometimes, I would say, mate, just simplify it. Don't try to use big words. Just tell me, not like he's a mathematician, physician.
But the art of coaching is, if somebody understands that 2 + 2 is 4, then you don't need to show them 4 apples and put them together.
Yeah.
So as a coach, it's like what's the description? It's like a lettuce. So imagine when you have a player and they have the root and then the leaves start to come on, and that's how the lettuce gets bigger, right? So if the player needs to go back in to learn something new, you have to go back to the serve, then it's the outer layers that you're removing until you get to the point where you want, and then you're letting them regrow in a way that you think works. There's no need to go beyond that. So some players have a high tennis IQ, and they just need to be told, hey, you need to keep your left hand up longer. Other players need to be told, hey, your shoulders are switching too early and you're collapsing on the serve, so you need to keep your left hand up longer to stay up. Other players need a bloody anatomical description of how it works with a mathematical formula explaining the apex of the parabola. So and Ken is somebody who goes to that maybe a little bit too early. Yeah. And Ken enjoys listening to himself speak because he has a lot of knowledge and he likes to show his knowledge, and he's got a little bit of ego like that, but if you can filter a lot of that, you realize that this guy's a bloody good technical coach, and I'll be the first to admit, because for me working in English is not my first language or whatnot, a lot of the times when I listen to some of you guys say something, exactly what I'm trying to say, I heard somebody say, instead of watching the contact, tell them to tuck their chin in.
Yeah.
Great. And for somebody, tucking the chin in might be a better cue than watching the contact.
Yeah.
And this is what coaching is. You learn what works for your player, and you learn ways to say it so that you get what you want, and then you tell them, hey, you did a good job. You know, I like the way you tucked your chin in. Next thing you know, they think they did it themselves, and that's the manipulation process of getting people to do what you want in a way that works for them. And every person is different.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah, just again touching on the small amount of coaching I've done, I'm just learning about individualizing cues, not being a guy that this is the thing I say to every player that comes in. Well, you know, and coaches tend to have themes of how coaches tend to like for instance, Mark. I really jived with the way Mark Draper coached, because game style wise, it wasn't too. I liked the way he promoted efficiency. He was helped me learn how to stay up in the court, how to not lose my balance, because if I tried to accelerate too hard at the ball, I may lose my form. And coaches have their themes of sometimes how they played. And
but not only what he knows and what he said, but the way that he said it.
Yeah.
You know, look at Mark as a character.
Yeah.
Very, very smart guy, very high tennis IQ, very analytical, very one of the best coaches, I think, that I know, and obviously he's doing great things for a long time now, but also the way that he says it connected with you. Now imagine when you have some Balkan kid, you know, a couple of itches at the end of the name. You have to understand that the way that you talk to them, literally, if you go back into psychology, the way that they were brought up is what they react to.
Yeah.
You know, imagine telling somebody nicely whose father yelled at them all their life. Then they don't know how to listen to nice.
Yeah.
You know, if you tell them sharply, because that's what they react to, then that's it is. It's like when I look at my kid, my 11, 12-year-old, they talk about bullying. You know, you have to tell the bully, please don't hit me. Man, the kid was probably beat by his father his whole life. The only thing he reacts to is violence, so the only way you'll stop him is probably to give him back violence. Mm-hmm. You know, but you can't teach this. But basically, it's you have to understand who you're dealing with, how you're dealing with it.
Yeah.
Aussies are very approachable, very easy. With you guys, you know, a little bit of tricks, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a bit of joke, you know, and you can get a lot out. I try to use humor.
Yeah.
Constantly to make rapport with people. I don't like people to think. I don't try to sell myself too much. You know, I prefer them to think I'm a bit dumber than I am.
Yeah.
You know, but then when you have something to say, then you say something. So I try not to be invasive.
Yeah.
You know, I talk a lot. I talk too much. I know that about myself. So I have to be careful that I don't talk too much serious stuff. So I prefer to talk shit. Yeah. And laugh and then have a good time. But if you really want to know me, then you have to get me like you just did, you know. Yeah. But I don't let anyone do that. So I don't let too many people do that. Yeah. So I think when you're working with players, you have to understand the system of the player that you're working with. The system is based on culture, on education, on upbringing, on family, on a lot of different things. And you have to find a coach which matches that. Yeah. And that's what I said. Imagine putting someone like me with a Swiss guy like Federer. Yeah. You know, the guy just shut up, man. I'm trying to play. Yeah. That's what I would get. Yeah. Or if you have a Spanish guy, vamos, you know, you got to get the fuego, the fire going constantly. Then you need a coach like that. Yeah. You know, you can't have the quiet guy working with the Spanish guy. With the Balkan guy, you got to freaking, you know, show them that you're stronger than them. You got to be the big wolf for them to listen to you. Because if they're not afraid of the bite, then they're not going to listen. Yeah. So it's Asians, you know, unbelievable to work with. They listen to everything you say, but you can't get to them emotionally. Yeah. So you have to find a way to connect. So that's what I'm saying. Not everybody is a good coach for everybody. There's a lot of coaches who know how to teach the forehand and the backhand. But how do you connect with someone and actually create an environment in which that player can be influenced, and that player trusts your influence, and that player actually is not manipulated but is influenced consciously? That's what you're trying to build. And for this, you need human trust. Yeah. Much more with girls than guys. Because a girl will not work with you unless they think you're a good guy. Yeah. A guy, he might be able to pay you. I don't care if you live or die tomorrow. I want your knowledge. Yeah. So it's a much more less personal, professional relationship you have with men. But with women, I don't think, and I'm married long enough, I don't think a woman will trust you unless you think that to some extent you care for her as a human.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think you're a good person and I want to see you succeed, and then they see that and then they listen to you because they will trust that I actually want to see them succeed. And you have to create this human relationship, and this is what makes the dynamics of coaching women and men usually quite different. You know? But I prefer myself to work with players who have a human connection with. Now that I run an academy, it's the parents that I have to connect with, and they're younger kids, so I can't have the same conversations with a 14, 15-year-old that I would with a 23, 4-year-old.
Yeah.
So I have to connect with the parents to some extent. And those parents that trust me. Those that don't know me think I'm probably crazy. And then I work with the ones who I know that I can do something with.
Yeah.
You know, and I think this is something that needs to be looked at more openly. You probably agree with this, no?
I agree. Yeah, for sure. Touching on, I just think of one example. I was thinking of my mate Gavin Van Pepperzeel, who's been doing a really good job with
really
Philip
good,
Seklich. And I was just thinking, I probably wouldn't be a good matchup to coach him because I'm too nice. I think Gavin's good at he's good at being stern.
Effed him off from Canberra. And the guy's switching on. Who was I talking with? Shaki on the bus in Adelaide, and Gav. We were talking about this. You know, it's like, what did I say that Gav liked? I said, you can't eat shit and pretend it's Nutella. Yeah. You know, you can't do that. You know, because if you do that, you're not going to respect yourself. So if Gav had a problem with whatever behavior with Phil or the way he's doing something, well, then it's his responsibility to make him understand that he can't do that. And how do you do that? Well, you have to have a consequence. Yeah. And sometimes these consequences, and I'm sure Phil agreed and understood and appreciated the punishment. You see, but you need to have a certain type of human relationship with someone to give them punishment and have them appreciate it. You can't do that to someone you don't know. And
as you said, you have to understand, be a good observer, noticing how they interact with their parents, thinking about what their upbringing's been
understand
like.
The culture, the system. Yeah. It's more than the culture, the system.
100%. Now you touched on the fact that of how different it is to work with males to female tennis players. You know, what are some things? I know I'm sure you could go into it extensively, but what are some obvious things for people that aren't that aware about the differences in being a male or female coach, or even I'm talking at the high performance level more so.
At the high performance level, women are a lot more focused and based on strategizing against the other girl. They are much more into watching the match and understanding that this girl hits her backhand better than her forehand, so I need to open the forehand and I need to attack the forehand. At the highest level in men, if you look at Nadal or if you look at Djokovic or a lot of these guys, they don't give a shit who they're playing against. They're just basically doing the big Nadal forehand, and if they know that if they do a good job doing what they do well, probably nobody can do anything about it. So to me, this was because I did have a stint with a couple of top 100 guys, and this was my first mistake. Was I was always looking at the opponent rather than talking to them. Hey, you know, you've been hitting this forehand really, really well. Do you think you can really try to continue to do this? Why do you think it's good? So you kind of get them to talk about it to see if you can actually add to their confidence. The other thing is once you do start to talk to them about the other player, because to some extent you have to, but not as deep as the women. If a guy has a good backhand, let's say, then the solution is not to try to exploit the weakness. It's to destroy the weapon. Yeah. So how do you think you have to hit your forehand if the guy's got a good backhand? How do you think you got to hit the ball there? You got to hit really heavy. You got to hit it really hard. You got to hit it really fast. You really got to take away this weapon that he has, and then he's going to have to play with his forehand, which we know is worse than his backhand. So it's more about exploiting weaknesses in women's tennis, in my opinion, and in men's tennis, it's more about not giving them what they want. Actually, that's secondary to you doing what you want. Yeah. You know, so guys have the big serves, or they have the the very big Sekulic's forehand, my God. You know, the way
Yeah,
that
they're
thing
gonna, as you
comes
say,
out,
with
you know.
Rafa and Novak, and there's this. It's like it's almost what you say. It's like it's 80% you're going to implement the same game style regardless of who you
Well,
play.
90, Rafa's not going to serve and
Yeah,
volley,
Rafa,
you know,
no.
and
Yeah.
the guy's one of the best volleyers I've ever seen in my life, you know,
Yeah.
but he doesn't win with that.
Yeah.
And if you look, I'll never forget the example of Carlos Moya. That guy came from nowhere into Australian Open finals. You were young. I was watching this. And the guy, they did analysis. The guy was hitting, I think, 74% of the court forehands. So they got Lundgren, who's one of the best coaches in the world, Swedish guy, and they got some coaches to work on his backhand. And the guy improved his backhand like crazy. And the guy was no longer hitting 74% of the shots with his forehand. He was hitting, 60. And the guy went from number 7 to number 40 in the world. But his backhand was better.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
it's how do you win?
Yeah.
How do you win? People were trying to exploit his backhand. So the more balls were coming there.
Yeah.
So he was able to run around more often.
Yeah.
And he was
He'd
able
camp
to
out
do the
there.
damage like crazy.
Yeah.
You know, so and once people were no longer trying to exploit his backhand, they realized, hey, he's Spanish, don't give him the inside outs. Play the bloody crosses
Play
with
hard
him,
in
you
the
know.
flank corner.
But this is just one example. There's a million examples like this, but I think these are good examples, you know, and they're very realistic examples. What's new to me and what I'm not good at, because Player Zone had access to Hawkeye only on center courts. Last time I was on tour, and I left in 2014, I think, 10 years ago. I didn't utilize the amazing technological detail such as O'Shaughnessy is doing, you know, and Djokovic lives off this. I know his team quite well. You know, they get information, which is unbelievable information, which no eyes can give you. Such as
utilizing technology to your
well,
advantage.
they're utilizing technology, and I haven't learned to do this because to me coaching is still quite intuitive.
Yeah.
But I can't deny the facts that every time this guy is under pressure, he's slowing down his first serve and serving wide.
Yeah.
I'm not going to notice that without the friggin' numbers being there on paper. And it's amazing some of the stuff you can take out of that. So that's for my evolution as a coach. Now that I'm coming back, I'll probably end up with a good player. I already am, but probably they will end up playing, high level. I'm gonna really have to get into this, you know,
Right.
because
I'm the same as you.
yeah,
I'm intuitive, and even when I was like, so Dane sent. There's a guy at the part of the analytics that he sent 5 matches off to him. Studies the 5 matches in depth. Comes back with all these different stats. You know,
amazing the details they can have.
Same with Charlie Camus when I did 2 weeks helping him out. He came back. I won't
that,
give
the
away.
Little lefty, that guy's playing good. Yeah,
he's
the guy's
good.
playing really good.
He's a little like Mark Polman's in a way. He was an absolute pleasure. He would get up revving. We shared a bedroom, you know.
Yeah.
He'd just I saw him from eyes open to eyes closed, and he's waking up ready to go. He was one out the door. If I proposed, let's go do a bit of extra of this and that, he was ready. But it was speaking about the analytics side. It was somewhat counterintuitive to me about what his dad and him said. I won't go into specifics, but this is just telling me certain areas where he had made the most unforced errors, and I wouldn't have thought so, you know. But you can't. But so it's about integrating that, right, with the intuitive side.
My biggest kick in the balls was Petra played Halep in China on center court because Halep was number 1 or 2 in the world, and I was coaching, watching the match. I took my notes and whatnot about Halep, and because it was a center court match, Cahill was coaching. I was there, and somehow I got my hands on. I can't remember how.
Before the match, yeah.
Halep rushing Petra between the point within 12 point ending. If the point.
Yeah.
If you gave me $1 million, I wouldn't have. She literally was drowning my player. Then I found out she was making to make the first serve, to make the points sooner, so that by the end of the first set, which did in her life, maybe it was, the other one was bleeding through her gills. For the next 3 shots, it was, I remember, but which my eyes never would have known. There's a lot of stuff here which I wouldn't even know how to look at paper. Here's how many seconds, here's the speed of the feet, it's undeniable. The thing is, if you're trying to prove, players are quite which is okay, you can leave a player to be reasonably egotistical.
In some ways it's good.
But not up to the point where they can deny something that is true. Well, facts you can't deny. So here it is.
It's not an argument anymore.
Well, you can't argue it. 2 + 2 is 4. I don't care what you say. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So I think this is something which I have to, or everybody has to learn to utilize and use a little bit more. The best eyes I've ever heard was Heinz Gundhardt, who was the Swiss. He's the president of the Swiss Federation, and Zoltan and Mark Draper. These guys see some amazing stuff, and they're not just looking at shots. They're looking at what's happening between the points. They're actually looking at the player. They see some amazing stuff. But how the hell do you match the amount of information? How many rotations on a ball? When they're nervous, you can't measure that.
When I was thinking about the evolution of tennis and how technology influences that years ago, I was thinking racket, strings, but it's not that. Obviously that evolves, but the thing that speaking about Gavin again, Gav was showing me the other day, what's it called? It's not PlaySite. There's an app that, is it PlaySite? Anyway.
Could be, there's a couple of them.
There's an app that Apple owns.
Yeah.
And so he's put this, it's a no-brainer. You should use it, and it's amazing where technology can be implemented into tennis, not with shoes and rackets and strings, but with understanding and breaking down a player, and
with undeniable facts.
Yeah,
with undeniable facts. So you can use this in 2 ways. You can use it to change something that you're doing, so that you're not so predictable, or you can use it to work on your weaknesses, because obviously